Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever had someone look you in the eyes and make you believe you were finally safe only for them to disappear without warning? One day everything felt right, the messages, the laughter, the promises, and then nothing. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. It's the kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream, it whispers, and that whisper haunts you. What did I do wrong? But tonight, I want to tell you something no one told you when they left. This wasn't the end of your story. This was the moment life started teaching you who you really are, and what love should never again cost you. And you know that moment when everything feels right, when the conversations flow effortlessly, the texts come in consistently, and the connection feels alive. You tell yourself this feels different. You're not overthinking, you're not chasing. You're just enjoying how easy it feels. He seems invested, he remembers the little things, he talks about the future. You finally let your guard down, and for the first time in a long time, you allow yourself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. And then, suddenly, it ends. No warning, no big fight, no explanation that makes sense, just silence. One day, he's talking about seeing you next weekend, and the next he's gone. You're left replaying every detail, wondering what you missed, what you did wrong, or what changed so fast that it could make someone walk away from something that felt so right. And it's confusing, isn't it? Because your mind keeps looking for a logical reason, but your heart is still trying to process the emotional crash. You start asking yourself questions that have no satisfying answers. Was he pretending the whole time? Did I scare him away? Did I imagine our connection? And in that spiral of confusion, you start to turn the knife inward. You start to make it about your worth, your timing, your effort. But let me tell you something. Someone ending it suddenly doesn't mean something was wrong with you. It means something was incomplete in them. And people don't always leave because something went bad. Sometimes they leave because something inside them doesn't match the depth of what you were building. Sometimes they meet you, feel that spark, love the way it makes them feel, but when it starts to require emotional courage, they freeze. Maybe he loved the attention, the admiration, the excitement of being seen by someone as amazing as you, but when it was time to give in return, he realized he wasn't ready to meet you at that level. That's not a reflection of your value, that's a reflection of his readiness, and you see, it's easy to enjoy the beginning of something real. The beginning doesn't demand consistency. The beginning doesn't expose insecurities. The beginning doesn't challenge someone to grow. But when the emotions deepen, when it stops being just attraction and starts being vulnerability, that's when people show who they really are. Some people want the feeling of connection without the responsibility of maintaining it. They want the warmth of your presence without the accountability of your heart. And when he ended it suddenly, that was your proof, not of your failure, but of his limitation. You think he ended it because something went wrong, but often it ends because you were right for someone who didn't have the capacity to handle right. He felt your authenticity, and it scared him because it asked for something real. You think he ghosted because you weren't enough, but the truth is, he ghosted because he couldn't stand in the light you brought to his shadows. But I know none of that makes it easier in the moment, because when you've opened up, when you've shared your time, your thoughts, your softness, it hurts to be left with nothing but confusion. It hurts to realize that someone can walk away from what you felt so deeply, and the cruelest part, he'll never understand what it cost you to trust him. He'll never see the nights you spent replaying every word, wondering if you should have done more, wondering if there was something you missed. But here's the truth that sets you free. Closure doesn't come from the one who left. Closure comes from the one who decides to stay standing after they're gone. You don't need him to explain why he ended it. You just need to understand what it revealed. It showed you that your heart is capable of connection. It showed you that you still believe in love even after being hurt. It showed you that you have the courage to feel when it would have been easier to stay numb. And that's strength, that's growth, that's power. And when someone ends it suddenly, your instinct will be to question everything you gave. But instead of asking, "Why did he leave?" start asking, "Why did I stay open even after everything I've been through?" Because that's the real miracle here. You didn't let your past make you cold. You gave something real, and that's rare in a world where most people protect themselves behind sarcasm, ego, and distance. You showed up honestly. That's your win, even if he couldn't see it, and you didn't lose something precious. He did. He lost the chance to build something real with someone who was ready for it. He lost the chance to experience the peace that comes from being with someone who actually cares. He lost the safety of a woman who knows how to love with depth and still respect herself. But you gained something more valuable, the awareness of what you will never again settle for. And every time someone leaves suddenly, it refines your radar. You learn what inconsistency feels like, what avoidance looks like, what emotional immaturity sounds like. You start to recognize it early, and next time, you won't confuse effort with attention. You'll stop mistaking excitement for alignment. You'll stop building castles on quicksand, and maybe this was never meant to be your forever. It was meant to be your filter. The one that cleared the way for someone who doesn't just stay when it's easy, but stays because it's real. The one who doesn't disappear when emotions deepen, but leans in because that's where connection begins. And I know what you're thinking. You're afraid to trust again because you don't want to feel this kind of pain twice. But what if this pain isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? Because every heartbreak that feels like destruction is actually construction. It's shaping you into someone who can love more wisely, not less deeply. And don't let his sudden eggs it teach you to close off. Let it teach you to discern faster. Don't let it harden you, let it heighten you. Because the woman who can recover from confusion with grace, the woman who can choose her peace over her need for answers, the woman who can say, "I didn't lose myself even when you left," that woman becomes unstoppable. And he may have ended it suddenly, but your story doesn't stop there. His silence does not define your worth. His absence doesn't erase your presence. What ended for him was just a moment, but what began for you is a transformation. You're not the same woman who started that story. You're wiser, calmer, more grounded. You've learned that love without clarity is chaos. That interest without effort is a trap. That attention without intention is manipulation. And you will never again be fooled by potential dressed as consistency. You will never again fight for someone who made leaving look easy. You will never again water a relationship where you are the only one pouring. Because the truth is, you didn't lose love. You lost confusion. You didn't lose your chance. You lost your distraction. You didn't lose your person. You lost the one who couldn't handle you being one. And so when you think back on it, remember this: the ending wasn't sudden. It was just revealed suddenly. The distance was already forming in his heart long before he left. You just didn't see it yet. And that's okay, because that means your heart was pure. You loved with optimism, not cynicism. You believed in connection, not games. You showed up with courage, and that's what real love always demands. And now you get to rebuild, not from bitterness, but from truth. You get to walk forward knowing that the right person won't make you question your worth, your timing, or your sanity. They won't end it suddenly because they won't want to end it at all. They'll fight to stay. They'll communicate. They'll show up because what's meant for you doesn't vanish. It grows, and so do you, and so do you. Because when something ends suddenly, you don't just lose the relationship, you lose the illusion. The illusion that someone's consistency meant commitment, that someone's charm meant depth, that someone's attention meant intention. You start to see how often people mistake connection for compatibility, and that clarity, though painful, becomes your greatest gift. It teaches you that just because something feels good doesn't mean it's good for you. It shows you that emotional chemistry can exist with people who are not emotionally ready. It reveals that love isn't proven by how fast someone makes you feel wanted. It's proven by how steadily they show up once they have you. And you begin to see the difference between someone who wants to experience you and someone who wants to know you. Between someone who's curious and someone who's consistent. Between someone who's enchanted by your light and someone who's ready to match it. That awareness transforms everything because now you start to listen differently. You start to look beyond words and pay attention to patterns. You start to understand that someone's actions when they don't have to impress you tell you far more than their promises when they do. And when you think back, you'll notice the subtle signs that something was off. The moments where he withdrew just slightly, the pauses where his warmth started to cool, the times when the future he spoke of stopped sounding like a plan and started sounding like a fantasy, but you didn't want to see it because you were enjoying what it felt like when it worked. And that's okay. You were doing what people with open hearts do. You were choosing hope. That doesn't make you naive. It makes you brave because in a world full of guarded people, the one who still dares to hope is the one most capable of real love. And now that you've been through this, something shifts inside you. You stop begging people to explain why they couldn't love you right, and you start asking yourself why you kept trying to prove you were worth loving. You stop chasing closure from others, and you start creating closure for yourself. You stop performing to be chosen, and you start realizing you were the prize all along. Because you finally understand the person who left didn't take your worth with them. They just walked out of a story they weren't strong enough to finish. And so you start to rebuild your relationship with yourself. You stop waiting for someone to tell you that you're enough and start acting like it. You stop trying to be understood by people who never cared to listen. You stop seeing your sensitivity as a weakness and start recognizing it as your superpower. Because the truth is, the same heart that got broken is the one that's going to build the life you've always wanted. You don't need someone to validate that. You just need to protect it better next time. And you start doing things differently now. You stop accepting mixed signals as interest. You stop over-explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. You stop romanticizing someone's potential and start respecting your peace. You learn to love from a place of fullness, not emptiness. You realize that you don't have to prove your value by how much you endure. You prove it by how quickly you walk away from what doesn't value you. And because the truth is, love that disappears that easily was never built to last. Real love doesn't just vanish. It communicates. It wrestles with discomfort. It shows up even when it's inconvenient. What left you so suddenly was never strong enough to stay, and that's not your loss. That's life removing what was pretending to be permanent. You may have felt like he took something from you, but what he really did was make room for peace, room for alignment, room for someone who won't run when it gets real. And one day, when you meet that person, the one who doesn't flinch when your depth shows, who doesn't disappear when life gets complicated, who doesn't end it suddenly when emotions get real, you'll look back and understand. You'll realize that this heartbreak wasn't the end of your story. It was the pruning before the bloom. It cut away what couldn't grow with you. It prepared you to recognize the difference between intensity and intimacy. But to get there, you have to go through the silence. You have to go through those nights when you want to send one more message, hoping for one more explanation. You have to go through the ache of missing someone who made no effort to stay. You have to go through the self-doubt, the flashbacks, the questioning. Because healing doesn't happen by skipping the pain. It happens by sitting with it until it stops controlling you. And you'll know you're healing when you stop wanting to know what he's doing and start caring about what you're becoming. When you stop replaying the conversations in your head and start planning the next chapter of your life. When you stop trying to prove that you would have been good for him and start realizing that you were too good for the version of him that left. And healing doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. You stop carrying the need for answers, the guilt, the what-ifs, the fantasy. You release it all because none of it serves you anymore. You replace it with peace, with self-respect, with quiet confidence. You start to glow differently, not because someone finally chose you, but because you finally chose yourself. And there's something magnetic about that energy. The moment you stop needing someone to complete you, the universe starts sending people who want to compliment you. The moment you stop chasing the unavailable, you start attracting the aligned. You become the kind of person who no longer fears endings, because you've learned that every ending is just the universe clearing space for something more honest. And when he ended it suddenly, he thought he was walking away from you, but in truth he was setting you free. Free from confusion, free from waiting, free from wondering if you were enough. And in that freedom, you begin to realize something powerful. You were never chasing him. You were chasing the feeling of being seen. You were chasing the version of yourself that felt alive in his presence. But you don't need him to feel that way. You can create that feeling on your own. You can be that woman who radiates light, not because someone made her feel special, but because she decided she is. And when that happens, when you finally reconnect with your own magic, everything changes. The same version of you that once begged for clarity now walks away with calm. The same version of you that once waited for closure now gives it to herself. The same version of you that once accepted crumbs now demands the whole table. Because you've learned that being alone isn't lonely when it's peaceful. You've learned that solitude is where your strength sharpens. And you no longer settle for someone who comes and goes as they please. You no longer confuse their return for redemption. You no longer think love should hurt to prove it's real. You begin to understand that love is not chaos, it's calm. It's not guessing, it's knowing. It's not performing, it's peace. And that realization changes everything about the way you move, the way you love, the way you show up. And because now you lead with standards, not fear. You speak your boundaries without apology. You stop negotiating your worth in spaces that require you to shrink. You stop trying to convince anyone to stay. Because if someone truly wants to be there, you'll never have to beg them to remain. The right person won't make you earn their consistency. It'll come naturally to them. Because they'll see your value without needing to be reminded. And the next time something starts to feel good, you'll still open your heart, but this time you'll bring your wisdom with it. You'll no longer rush to label something that hasn't proven its stability. You'll no longer overinvest before you've seen effort in return. You'll no longer build your hopes on potential. You'll build them on proof. And that doesn't make you guarded. It makes you grounded. It makes you someone who loves deeply, but wisely, and because that's what this heartbreak has taught you. It's not about avoiding love. It's about recognizing real love when it appears, the kind that doesn't end suddenly. The kind that grows in clarity, not confusion. The kind that chooses you not just once, but over and over again. And when that love arrives, it won't have to repair what someone else broke. It will simply meet the healed version of you. The version who no longer chases, who no longer questions her value, who no longer mistakes silence for closure. The version who knows that if something ends suddenly, it's only because something greater is about to begin. And because something greater is about to begin. And when that moment comes, you won't be the same person you were before. You'll move differently. You'll listen more closely, not to their words, but to your intuition. You'll feel when something isn't right, and instead of fighting to make it fit, you'll step back and protect your peace. You'll no longer chase chemistry, you'll look for consistency. You'll no longer confuse butterflies with alignment. You'll stop romanticizing potential and start respecting effort. Because once you've seen how suddenly something can end, you no longer invest in how it starts. You invest in how it continues. And you'll start to understand that real connection doesn't demand constant reassurance, it builds it. It doesn't vanish when things get uncomfortable, it deepens through it. You'll see how easy it is for someone to say all the right things, but you'll also see how rare it is for someone to keep showing up after the words have been said. And that's where your strength will shine, because you'll no longer be impressed by promises. You'll be moved by patterns. And there will be moments where your mind tries to go back, where nostalgia tempts you to replay the good times, to reimagine how things could have been if he had just stayed. But now you'll recognize that kind of thinking as emotional quicksand, because nostalgia can only show you what was sweet, it hides what was breaking. You'll remind yourself that the version of him you miss was often the version he performed, not the one who remained. You'll remind yourself that the love you gave was genuine, but it deserves a place where it can be received, not drained. And you'll stop needing to be the one who fixes everything, because you'll finally understand that healing someone who's not ready to grow isn't love, it's self-abandonment. You'll stop trying to be their safe place if they can't be yours. You'll stop trying to hold space for someone who keeps walking out of it. You'll stop confusing your ability to love deeply with your responsibility to tolerate chaos. Because real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. It requires you to find someone who helps you stay found. And there will come a day when you wake up and realize you don't think about him first anymore, when your mornings aren't clouded by questions, when your evenings aren't haunted by memories, when you no longer crave his message or fear his silence, when his absence no longer feels like a loss but like space you're finally free to fill with things that grow you. You'll fill it with peace, with purpose, with your own laughter, with people who pour into you the way you've always poured into others. And in that moment, you'll realize something profound. What hurt you most wasn't losing him. It was losing the version of yourself that hoped he was the one. But that version of you needed to be broken so you could rebuild stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The pain wasn't punishment, it was the birth of a boundary. The heartbreak wasn't rejection, it was redirection. And you start living differently. You stop performing for love. You stop explaining your worth. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone. You stop prioritizing people who make you an option. You stop waiting for them to decide if you're worth staying for, and start deciding for yourself that you're worth not being left. You take your power back quietly, without announcement, without revenge, without trying to prove anything. You simply detach from what doesn't honor you. And there's a beauty in that kind of detachment. It's not bitterness, it's awareness. It's not coldness, it's clarity. You don't need to hate him to move on from him. You don't need to wish him harm to heal. You just need to stop making him the main character in a story that's supposed to be about your growth. Because when you do, your energy shifts, and suddenly, what once felt like rejection now feels like liberation. And you'll start noticing things you didn't before. How peaceful your mornings are without waiting for a text. How calm your heart feels when you no longer expect mixed signals. How beautiful it is to enjoy your own company. You'll rediscover your passions, the things that make you feel alive independent of anyone else's validation. You'll start spending your energy on what fulfills you instead of what confuses you. And you'll see that the love you wanted from him was really the love you were meant to give yourself. The reassurance, the attention, the tenderness, you'll realize you were always capable of giving it to you. And when you finally do, you'll start attracting people who match that frequency, because healed energy doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't beg, it inspires. It doesn't demand, it radiates. And that's when the right people start entering your life. People who don't leave without warning. People who communicate when something feels off. People who make effort a habit, not a highlight. People who won't just like how you love. They'll respect how you love. They'll understand your boundaries, they'll cherish your openness, and they'll see your depth not as something to fear, but as something to honor. But here's the thing. You won't be desperate for them. You'll appreciate them, but you won't depend on them. Because by then, you'll have learned that love is not meant to complete you, it's meant to complement you. You'll understand that peace is the foundation, not the prize. You'll realize that when someone truly values you, you won't have to ask them to stay. They'll make it clear that they're not going anywhere. And the irony is that the very heartbreak that broke you will become the reason you never break the same way again. The sudden ending that once shattered you becomes the beginning of your emotional independence. You'll look back and realize that the person who left was never meant to define your story. They were meant to teach you how to protect your peace. They were the wake-up call that reminded you what love should feel like and what it should never cost. And when you reach that level of peace, you'll start to notice that your standards don't scare people away, they filter them. You'll stop attracting those who are intimidated by your strength and start aligning with those who are inspired by it. You'll stop over-explaining your value to people who can't see it, and you'll start walking confidently toward those who already do. Because once you've healed, you no longer look for love from a place of emptiness. You look for it from a place of abundance. And the person who left thought they ended your story, but they simply exited the chapter they were never meant to finish. You kept writing, you kept growing, you kept choosing yourself, and every page you've written since then has been proof that what ended wasn't your worth, it was your waiting. And you'll realize how little sense it makes to chase someone who's already shown you they don't know what to do with your heart. You'll realize how powerful it is to stay soft in a world that tried to harden you. You'll realize that your capacity to love deeply is not a liability, it's a legacy. It's what will make the right person fight to stay when others ran. And because the truth is, people who end things suddenly are often those who can't face the depth of what they've started. They want the spark without the fire, the connection without the commitment, the warmth without the weight. But you're built for something deeper. You're built for real, for mutual effort, mutual energy, mutual respect. For something that doesn't crumble when emotions surface, but becomes stronger because of them. And once you've experienced the pain of someone leaving without warning, you'll promise yourself never to do that to anyone else. You'll communicate honestly, you'll move intentionally, you'll love consciously, because you've seen the damage that silence can cause. You've felt the confusion it leaves behind, and you've chosen not to be another source of that for someone else. And you'll love differently now, not cautiously, but consciously. You'll know that love isn't proven by how much you give up, it's proven by how you both show up. You'll know that if someone can't match your energy, it's not your job to lower it. You'll know that being alone is not something to fear, it's the foundation of every great love that follows. Because the woman who's at peace alone becomes unstoppable in partnership. And that's what this moment was preparing you for. Every heartbreak, every silence, every goodbye, it all served a purpose. It all carved you into someone capable of loving with wisdom, not just emotion. It all built the version of you who knows the difference between attachment and alignment, between being chosen and being valued, between being wanted and being understood. And you won't thank him for leaving, but you'll thank yourself for surviving it. You'll thank yourself for not letting it harden you, for still believing in connection, for still having the courage to love again. Because no matter how suddenly it ended, what remains is your heart, and it's stronger than ever. And because no matter how suddenly it ended, what remains is your heart, and it's stronger than ever. Stronger not because it's invincible, but because it knows what it deserves. Stronger because it learned how to stay open even after being let down. Stronger because it knows that peace is worth more than potential. And that strength doesn't come from pretending you're fine. It comes from rebuilding yourself piece by piece until your reflection no longer looks like pain but purpose. And you start noticing that your standards are no longer rooted in fear of losing someone. They're rooted in protecting your peace. You no longer ask, do they like me? You ask, do I feel safe here? You no longer chase validation. You look for alignment. You no longer cling to someone's potential. You pay attention to their patterns. You no longer get lost in their charm. You ground yourself in reality. Because now you've seen what happens when you confuse intensity for intimacy. And you know you'll never let that happen again. And you learn to sit comfortably in your solitude. You realize that loneliness and aloneness are not the same thing. Loneliness is missing someone who's absent. Aloneness is finding yourself in your own presence. And in that quiet, you rediscover things about yourself you'd forgotten, the passions, the quirks, the dreams that once defined you before you started orbiting someone else's world. You start to see that your worth was never tied to being chosen. It was tied to your ability to choose yourself even when it hurt. And your perspective shifts. You start to understand that people leave not always because of something you did, but because of who they are. Some people can't handle consistency because it requires accountability. Some can't handle depth because it exposes their fears. Some can't handle love that doesn't play games because it demands emotional maturity. And when they walk away, it's not a rejection of your value, it's a reflection of their limits. You stop taking it personally. You start realizing that not everyone has the capacity to meet the kind of love you're ready to give. And instead of seeing that as something to mourn, you begin to see it as divine redirection. Because life will never take away what's truly meant for you. It only clears out what's not. Every ending, no matter how abrupt, is an invitation to begin again, wiser, calmer, and more self-aware. So you stop asking, why did they leave, and start asking, what did this teach me? Because once you start asking better questions, you start living better answers. And you'll start to notice that peace becomes your new love language. You stop needing chaos to feel passion. You stop mistaking unpredictability for excitement. You stop equating struggle with worth. Love that drains you will no longer impress you. You'll crave the kind of love that feels like stillness after the storm, the kind that doesn't make you question your place in someone's life, the kind that feels like coming home, not surviving a battlefield. And when you start attracting that kind of energy, it's because you've become that kind of energy. The way you talk to yourself changes. You stop saying, "Why wasn't I enough for him?" and start saying, "Why did I accept less than I deserved?" You stop saying, "He abandoned me," and start saying, "He freed me from confusion." You stop saying, "I wish he'd stayed," and start saying, "I'm glad I learned." Because the language you use to describe your pain determines how long you stay in it, and that shift, when it happens, it's powerful. Because suddenly you're not waiting for apologies, you're not waiting for closure, you're not waiting for anyone to see your worth. You already see it. You already know that if someone can walk away easily, they were never meant to stay deeply. You already understand that the love you want can't be built with someone who fears depth. You already know that your time, energy, and presence are the most valuable currencies you'll ever give, and you'll no longer spend them on confusion. And there's something magnetic about a person who's done the work to heal. You can feel it in the way they move quietly confident, unshaken by uncertainty, uninterested in games. You can hear it in their voice when they say no with grace, when they set boundaries without guilt, when they walk away from what doesn't serve them. You can see it in their eyes, the softness that remains even after being broken, because they've learned that love doesn't require you to harden. It requires you to stay soft without losing yourself. And you'll start to realize that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about no longer letting it define you. The memory might still sting, but it won't own you. You'll still remember the moments that hurt, but they'll become lessons instead of triggers. You'll still remember the silence that followed his exit, but now it'll sound like freedom, not rejection. Because healing doesn't erase the past, it just transforms your relationship with it. And then, without even noticing, you'll begin to smile again for no reason. You'll start to feel joy return in small ways through music, laughter, deep conversations, or simply waking up and realizing that you didn't think about him for days. You'll notice how light you feel when you're not carrying the weight of trying to be understood by someone who never tried to understand you. You'll start to enjoy your own peace more than you ever enjoyed their presence. And soon, you'll understand that the closure you were searching for was never meant to come from his words. It was meant to come from your growth. You'll realize that the moment you stopped chasing answers and started nurturing yourself was the moment you truly moved on. You'll see how far you've come, not just from him, but from the version of you that tolerated confusion, accepted mixed signals, and believed love had to hurt to be real. And that version of you was doing her best, but this version of you, the one who's rising from it, that's the woman who knows her worth so deeply that she'd rather walk alone than walk on eggshells. That's the woman who no longer needs to convince someone to choose her because she's already chosen herself. That's the woman who knows that being left was never the end. It was the beginning of her becoming. And when you meet someone new, and you will, you won't come to them needing to be healed. You'll come whole, you'll come grounded, you'll come clear, you'll bring peace, not pain. You'll bring confidence, not confusion. You'll bring boundaries, not fear. And that energy will change everything. Because now, love will no longer feel like guessing. It will feel like knowing. It won't feel like chasing. It will feel like aligning. And you'll look back one day and realize that the very person who left you taught you how to stay with yourself. You'll see that it was just the spark that lit the fire of your transformation. And you'll understand that sometimes the universe has to break your heart to save your soul. It has to remove what distracts you to redirect you to what fulfills you. It has to end what feels right temporarily so it can give you what's right eternally. And you'll begin to move through life with quiet power, the kind that doesn't need validation, doesn't need closure, doesn't need to prove anything. The kind of power that comes from peace, because the real glow-up isn't about showing them what they lost. It's about realizing you never lost anything essential. You only lost what wasn't meant to stay, and you'll catch yourself smiling when you think of how much you've grown. How the woman who once begged for clarity now demands consistency. How the woman who once cried over rejection now thanks life for redirection. How the woman who once waited for someone's return now runs toward her future without looking back. And maybe one day he'll see you again, not physically, but energetically. He'll sense your calm, your self-assurance, your peace, and he'll remember the version of you he once knew. But by then you'll be untouchable, not because you've built walls, but because you've built standards. Not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care about the right person, yourself. And that's the most powerful shift of all, because once you've learned that endings don't define you, you stop fearing them. You start embracing life fully, knowing that whatever leaves makes space for something greater. You understand that love isn't about possession, it's about presence. It's not about convincing, it's about connection. And when something real finally finds you, it won't come suddenly, and it won't leave suddenly. It will arrive gently, grow steadily, and stay consistently. Because now you're no longer chasing love, you've become it.